Good afternoon, folks. Today's video, I apologize, it's going to be some background noise due to the blast heater going. It was cold out in the barn today and I couldn't bring myself to turn that thing off. Hi. Today's topic is going to be about setting timing on a shift-up engine, performance engine. It's a bit different to set timing on a stock engine. Most times the stock engine in these older cars, it'll be on like the hood, there'll be a sticker, maybe on the radiator support for the sticker that tells you set the timing at 10 degrees curb idle. Now my father had an old Plymouth once that said set it at 0 degrees curb idle. These numbers are not appropriate for a souped up engine. In this engine here, I'm going to use mine as my first example because it's a real world example. I set the total timing at 38 degrees. I set the curb idle timing at 14 degrees. And it's a Pertronix distributor that has 24 degrees of mechanical advance, so 24 plus the 14 is 38. This works really well for these 350 Chevys with the dish pistons. If you have an engine with flat tops where you have an effective quench, the total timing might be better at 36 degrees or 35. But with this engine, it has the original dish pistons in it. So I have the vacuum advance hooked up. It's an adjustable vacuum advance. So I have that at about 10-12 degrees. So at idle, with the vacuum advance on, it's kind of between 27-28 degrees. So I found with my Firebird back in the day that it liked 38 degrees total timing, and I had it set up almost exactly like this. Only in that case I had the vacuum advance hooked to the ported vacuum, but I had a supercharger on the thing, so that might have changed it, or maybe it didn't matter which one I hooked it up to. There's two other choices. Examples I'm going to give. One, I'm going to give an example of what to do if you have an overcammed engine, and the last example I'll give will be the stock engine that maybe you're trying to get it to be a little more responsive. First, the overcam engine. There was a fellow I knew at one time that had an old Plymouth with a 440 in it, and it was one of the smog era 440s that he had put into it with 8-to-1 compression. And he put a 292 Magnum cam in it. It was a comp cam stride. That's like, I think it's 244 intake duration at 50. And when you use an oversized cam like that in stock compression ratio, the first choice is take the cam back out and put a more appropriate one in. But if you're going to leave it in there, you're going to need more timing. But in his case, the thing to do was to crank your curb idle up to about 20 degrees. You would want your total timing to be 42 or 43 degrees most likely. And vacuum advance you would experiment with how it liked it best. If you do that with an overcammed engine, you'll get back some of that torque that you lost by overcamming it. The last example is, what do you do with a stock engine? You want to get a little more zip out of it. The first thing I would do is I would, with road tests, try to, like, let's say the stock setting is 10 degrees. Maybe you try to turn it up to 12 and see if it jingles, if you get any spark knock or not. If it doesn't spark knock, you might take it. But what you want to make sure of, though, is to use your timing light and measure how much centrifugal advance, the mechanical advance the distributor has in it. And that's going to vary by the year and what swab control it came with and so on, and even whether or not it has a factory distributor in it, because you don't really want to go above the stock total timing. So if the stock total timing was 38, 39 degrees, you keep that there, and you work with your centrifugal advance to try to cheat a little more on the initial side by, limiting the amount of centrifugal. The other thing you can do is, I guess the spring kit that came with my Pertronix distributor, it has a couple extra sets of springs. You can get the centrifugal to work faster, and that would be a thing that you could do with a stock distributor. Get it to advance a little bit faster, that'll give you a little bit more zip. But in the case of the stock engine, there is some chance of burning a valve or whatever if it's not souped up, because the stock can there's no overlap, there's a lot of heat. But that can work really well. And sometimes, let's say it was a smog motor where it no longer has the catalytic converter on its stuff. Maybe you can get away with a little more timing, but don't be too greedy. 2-3 degrees would be about as far as I would exceed the stock limits on that. So I thought I'd go through a few specific examples that I thought of, and then I would I would show a couple occasions where ported vacuum may actually be useful, though it's not going to be as common. The most common way is going to be manifold vacuum, because souped up engines tend to want more advance at idle and really low RPMs. So the first example I'm going to point to is my setup. The distributor in my car is set this way. I got 14 degrees initial timing. The centrifugal advance in it, it's a Pertronix distributor, has 24 degrees, giving it 38 total. And the vacuum advance is on the manifold. So what you get is that at idle, it's actually advanced maybe 30 degrees, 31 degrees, because the vacuum advance is kicking in already. And I think that's appropriate most of the time. I mean, you're looking at an engine where compression was raised a little bit, 9 3/4. It has sort of a middle of the road, cam. It's 228 at 50. So that setup, I think, works great for the majority of hot rod engines out there. Maybe not those specific settings, but hooking your vac advance to the manifold. I also recommend an adjustable vacuum advance canister. Mine has that. Obviously the car's not done, so I haven't road tested it yet, but when I do, I will likely adjust it. Another thing is, sometimes people have these old distributors, and like I've seen in like Uncle Tony's show, working with this old stuff is fun, and it is, if you have the patience for when things go wrong. But in here, you have, this thing has points. I believe this is an old Oldsmobile distributor, a spare one I have. Has a points ignition. It has the vacuum advance here, and underneath you have your centrifugal advance. Now, a couple things people do with them, and this is leading to where you might do these other way, is you could lock out this distributor. Okay, that's an old school way that I don't recommend. I'm not going to do it in any of my cars, but people do it. So if you put this in locked out at 36 degrees, that means you have 36 degrees at idle, and so that's a lot at idle already. I would not plug in to manifold vacuum in that case. I would change out this canister for an adjustable canister, and I'd put vacuum advance on ported, and I'd start doing road tests to see how much vacuum advance it would take. And so if you have an old hot rod that's already been modified in this way, that would be a way to go to get it to work halfway decent. Another thing that commonly happens, is more common than locking them out, is people will recurve these distributors. They'll change the advanced springs. Sometimes people limit the centrifugal advance. Like in this edition, this example, I said 14 degrees centrifugal. I just reversed that. That's a number that you could reach by limiting the mechanism in this distributor. So you'd say, okay, now we're running 24 initial and 14 centrifugal for a total of 38. Because I'm assuming I'm doing these thought process all on my engine, and that's where I would put it if I did that. Now that one I would also put the vacuum advance on ported. Unless you had the canister adjusted way down. But why would you do that? Because then it would be way down when you're driving it and defeat the purpose of the vac advance. So that's another case where you might do ported. And you might ask, well, why would you have your ignition set this way? That would be a good way to set your ignition if your engine is overcammed. You know, if you maybe you're just doing a rat rod and you swapped out the cam for the sound. Okay, so you have 8-to-1 compression. It's a good wrench motor. You put a big cam in it for the sound, but now it's lazy on the low end because it's too much cam. Well, if you did that, that would bring back some of your torque. And also, with the vac advance unported, it probably wouldn't spark knock, and you could adjust it to drive pretty good. So that's another example of where you would use ported vacuum, you know, in one of your hot rods. So, to me, the reality is, when Andy from Motorsports says to do it on the manifold, he is absolutely right. And for him to say, I get skeptical whenever somebody says always. The word always, there's an old adage that always never happens. Most of the time, because he's talking about engines that are built properly. He's talking about engines with parts matched up properly and about things done in more contemporary ways. But if you're doing a nostalgia thing and you want to do everything the old way, you know, because you're more for show and stuff like that, you might end up doing it this way to get it to run good with your old school distributor setup. So the answer to me is 99% of people are going to want to put the vac advance on the manifold with their hot rod. But there are 1%ers who want to do things old school ways, want to do things the nostalgia way, or maybe you bought somebody else's hot rod and that's how it already is, and so you just want to tune the thing. So that's my answer, rather than saying this guy's right and that guy's wrong, is that, yeah, mostly this, sometimes one of these. That's the answer I have. All right, take it easy, folks. Good luck with your projects.